Please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Senators Alquist?
Here.
Alquist here. De Leon? Fuller?
Here.
Fuller here. Dutton?
Here.
Dutton here. Steinberg?
Here.
Steinberg here.
A quorum having been established, today we only have a couple of items, but they are important items. And we begin with the governor's appointees appearing today. I would like to ask Michael P. Florio and Catherine J. Sandoval, both up for confirmation as members of the California Public Utilities Commission. Please sit down.
Thank you.
Let me welcome you, first of all.
Thank you.
And tell you that the Rules Committee process, as you know, has several purposes. One is to, of course, assess the qualifications and the ability and the suitability of gubernatorial nominees who have to pass muster confirmation with the Senate. That is one specific purpose, and we will do that and evaluate that today. But secondly, the purpose is to have a good, robust discussion and to inform the public about the challenges you face, about your relationship, your agency's relationship with the other branches of government, and to help illuminate what you do and to give the public a sense of where you want to take the Public Utilities Commission and at the same time where the legislature, sometimes we even disagree, where we believe the Public Utilities Commission ought to go. I don't have to tell you that these appointments by the governor to this commission are particularly important. They're particularly important because the Public Utilities Commission is charged constitutionally with protecting the public, to protect consumers, to certainly protect the public safety. And I emphasize the latter, as I know it has been a significant part of your work since the beginning of your tenure. And so what I'd like to ask you is to both make brief opening statements, to take the opportunity, because, you know, this is a moment, and hopefully a moment you won't forget, to introduce your family, your special guests or friends who are here with you today. And after your brief opening statements, we will then open up the questions. And I think this is going to last a little bit longer than the usual hearing. Not because of you in particular, but because of the responsibilities that you are undertaking. To all the members of the public out there, I'm sorry that there aren't enough seats. Those of you standing, you're welcome to stand. I know we also have closed-circuit television where? Right outside, right on the other side of the door. So if you need some relief, you go on out that way. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. That way, yes. That's what I've been trying to tell you. And away we go. So I don't know who wants to start.
Sir, go ahead.
Okay. It's okay for the camera people to take pictures. I have no problem with that as long as you don't disrupt the proceeding in any way. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Senators. It's a great honor to appear here before you today. I would like to introduce at least part of my family. My wife, Ellen Berry.
Welcome.
MacArthur Award-winning advocate for women in prison and their families. My daughter, Angela Berry Florio. She is a sophomore at Ithaca College, majoring in creative writing and minoring in psychology and screenwriting. My 17-year-old son, Tony, is in high school today. Hopefully learning about the business of government in the academic way, but he's the financial wizard in the family who's been beating me at Monopoly since before he could read the little cards. And so, with all this talent, I'm probably only the fourth most accomplished person in the family, and I'm looking over my shoulder anxiously at the cats to see if they're gaining on me. I also have my office team here with me. Raise your hands. Stellar advisors and administrative staff who keep me on the straight and narrow. The job that I've been asked to fulfill is a huge responsibility. We set rates that affect millions of consumers and hundreds of thousands of businesses throughout the state of California. We supervise billions of dollars in investment per year, investment that provides good living wage jobs for Californians. We also oversee industries that account for significant air, water, and other environmental impacts that we must do our best to minimize. And most importantly, in this past year, we monitor and enforce safety standards for complex infrastructure systems that, as we've all learned much too painfully, can kill if not properly maintained. So, why am I brave or foolish enough to think that I can take on this job? Well, I've spent my entire adult life advocating for consumers of these industries in proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission. And in the process, I've learned a lot about how these companies operate, and know that I can draw upon that knowledge, not to know all the answers necessarily, but to be able to ask the right questions. And that's a lot of what being a commissioner is about, is asking the right questions and trying to find the right answers through the input of many, many parties that appear before us. I've been asked, is being a commissioner different from being an advocate for consumers? And I think I'd answer that with a no and a yes. No, in the sense that I'm still looking out for the concerns of consumers and trying to do the best job I can to meet their needs. As a commissioner, it is different because there is a broader set of concerns that I have to take into account. The economy, the environment, public safety, things that were always considerations in my work at Turn, but are now part of my primary responsibility. It's a sobering task, and I approach it with the utmost humility, but with the core value that I am here to serve and protect the public interest, which, while it has many facets, will always be the beacon for me in my decision-making. I will listen to you, to my colleagues, to experts in the field, and most of all to the people of California, and do my level best to exercise good judgment in all aspects of my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Florio. Commissioner Sandoval, welcome to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Great to see you all. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking you, of course, for your consideration for my confirmation as a Commissioner of the California Public Utilities Commission. And I'd like to introduce my family. Many of my members of my family are here. My husband, Steve Smith, who has been a fantastic partner and stalwart support. My father, Vernon Casay, and stepmother, Cheryl Casay. My mother, Maria Elena Sandoval Casay, watches us from above. My sister, Barbara Sandoval, and my uncle and aunt, John and Nancy Sandoval, and my niece, Carolina Lugo, and her boyfriend, Henry Torres.
Henry.
And my father, I missed that one. So my father-in-law, John Smith, and his wife, Marie Effenbeck Smith. My uncle-in-law, Glenn Smith. My cousin-in-law, Dana Sherwood. And my best friend since high school, Madeline Beaumont. And also have many other friends and supporters here, including, if I can single out one in particular, my colleague, Professor Alan Hammond from Santa Clara University, also a telecommunications expert and longtime friend. I regret that my stepchildren, Christina and Hannah Smith, could not be here because they are trying to add classes at American River College and Sacramento State University, respectively. They got an email from their professor saying that if they did not show up at the first day of class, they would be dropped. So they are here in spirit and by text if needed, as befitting their generation.
Let me welcome to all of you.
Right.
I'd single y'all out by name, but it might take a while.
So you know, what can I say? A Latino blended family. So my sister Anna Lugo and Mike Perales, my sister Barbara's longtime boyfriend, are working in LA and regret they could not be here. And I'm very grateful for the advice and expertise and support of my chief of staff, Dita Skatagi, my energy, water, telecom, and legal advisors, Colette Kirsten, Steve St. Marie, and Melissa Slauson. And I want to thank our many friends and family for joining us today, and appreciate all of your love and support and counsel. So gracias, and thank you for indulging me in those introductions. All right, so a few words about this opportunity and why I believe it's so important for the people of the state of California. First of all, I want to thank Governor Brown for the opportunity to serve in this position. It has been a terrific opportunity and an important year, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to serve on the CPUC. So as you mentioned, Senator Steinberg, our work is critical, and through our work at the CPUC, I seek to improve the safety, reliability, accountability, availability, and affordability of utility services, to create jobs and foster investment, and to improve California's economy and environment. The CPUC's decisions, as you know, affect the electricity, water, gas, and communications bills Californians pay, and their safety in their homes, businesses, and on public conveyances, and when crossing train tracks. The CPUC's fundamental mandate is to ensure that utilities provide safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. It's really 6 words that this legislative body chose. And as a lawyer, if I can think a law is beautiful, I think that this law is beautiful. And I often think about that mandate: safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates in accordance with the California Public Utilities Code, the California Constitution, and the laws of the state of California. A capable and effective and accountable CPUC is critical to this mission, and I'm honored to have my colleague here today, Commissioner Florio. I bring to this commission my professional experience as a telecommunications, antitrust, and contracts law professor, as a manager in state and federal government at the state of California's Business, Transportation, and Housing Agency, and through more than 5 years of service at the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C. And I also bring my private sector work in business and in law. I am a native Californian, and am committed to the success of the people of our Golden State. I grew up in the Los Angeles area and graduated from California Public Schools. I had the honor to earn a BA from Yale University, a master's degree as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, and was honored to be the first Latina to win a Rhodes Scholarship. I earned my JD from Stanford Law School. My background as a Latina from East Los Angeles, whose family came from humble roots, also influences my perspectives. My family lived in a mobile home park during my early childhood, and then an apartment in East Los Angeles, and then eventually was able to move to a home in Montebello, California. I understand the struggles of Californians who live in mobile homes, apartments, and homes across the state, and their struggles to pay their utility bills and get high-quality service. My mother's first language was Spanish. Yo hablo español también. I speak Spanish as well, giving me insight into the challenges and viewpoints of those who speak languages other than English. So I want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about my regulatory philosophy that guides my work at the CPUC. And I would describe my philosophy by the acronym LAW, as perhaps befitting a law professor. So the first L in law stands for law. Proposed decisions must abide by the law as defined in the relevant legislative, legal, and constitutional mandates and case law. They must be supported by rigorous legal and economic analysis, evidentiary facts, and be developed through a sound process. The A in the acronym LAW stands for several A's: accountability, affordability, accessibility, and analytical rigor. To ensure accountability, the CPUC must act in accordance with its public trust. The CPUC must ensure that utilities are accountable for their conduct, for system safety and reliability, and that they manage customer information and investments and revenues judiciously. Our decisions must promote affordability as measured by just and reasonable rates, while providing incentives for conservation and safe, reliable, robust utility service. We should also promote accessibility of utility and communication services to all Californians through measures that spark investment and service deployment and provide appropriate support to low-income and disabled customers and those who live in high-cost areas. The CPUC's decision-making process must also be accessible and transparent. And our work must be analytically rigorous. CPUC decision-making must be evidence-based, participatory, transparent, and guided by our governing laws. And we must also consider the widespread implications of CPUC actions for Californians, California communities, consumers, the economy, jobs, competition, diversity, sustainability, innovation, consumer protection, and the environment. As you know, our state confronts large-scale challenges, such as constraints in the availability of fossil fuels, water, spectrum, and other vital resources, as the governor spoke about this morning, climate change, economic challenges, and deteriorating infrastructure. We must achieve the state's renewable energy mandate while ensuring just and reasonable rates and analyzing the effect of our policies on households, commercial, industrial, and small business ratepayers. The CPUC's success in meeting those challenges will be measured by improvements to utility service, reasonableness of rates, high quality and innovative products and services, better disclosure to consumers, and widespread enjoyment of the fruits of energy efficiency, conservation, broadband deployment, and innovative competitive markets. So in closing, I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about what we focused on during this first year. So during my tenure, I've had the opportunity to focus on telecommunications matters, and I've also been honored to serve as the CPUC's Small Business Commissioner and its Water Commissioner. Our proceedings in the past year have ensured that Californians continue to enjoy lower prices and innovative services resulting from telecommunications competition. Our work sparked the creation of thousands of jobs and new investments in infrastructure, technology, and better service. I am proud that in my early months at the CPUC, I helped to craft a resolution that facilitates investments in safety and reliability and saves consumers money through accelerated federal tax depreciation for investments made in 2011 and 2012. As a result of this resolution, PG&E, for example, invested nearly $800 million and created nearly 4,800 new jobs using the expedited process our resolution created to facilitate investments in safety and reliability. I am proud that working with Commissioner Florio, my colleagues and the staff, that our orders have made natural gas service safer by requiring testing or replacement of pipelines that lack appropriate documentation and prior hydro testing. Options for renewable power have increased. Those who speak a language other than English are better able to submit and resolve their complaints to the CPUC through improvements to our website that make telephone-based translation services more readily available. It would be a privilege and an honor to continue this work, and I ask for the confidence and support of the California State Senate to do so. And thank you for this opportunity and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you both. I want to ask one sort of overarching philosophical question, and then I want to turn it over to Senator Ahlquist and move around the horn as we do here. Governors generally appoint commissioners to this body and similar bodies that are reflective of a governor's philosophy. I think that's a fair statement. And as such, we know that the PUC, as a very high-profile commission, has changed, if you will, from one administration to another. And regardless of the administration, the same theme kind of plays out. And that theme is, should the PUC, how much should the PUC regulate? And how much should it allow competition and the changing nature of technology and society to play out without as much regulation? It certainly played out quite a bit in the telecom area, where, again, to just state the parameters, there are some who believe that given the fact that we no longer primarily use a single telephone in a home that's connected to the wall, and that consumers have a wide variety of choices when it comes to how they communicate, that the old model of regulation is not appropriate. There are others who argue that the role of the PUC is to always make sure that consumers, and especially low-income and elderly consumers, have every option at their disposal without being taken advantage of. That's just my characterization of the way I see the debate. I'd like to hear your general philosophy about the role of regulation and whether or not you believe that regulation, the role of a regulatory agency has to change with the advance of technology in the telecom area specifically, but in general.
Great. Would you like me to start?
Sure.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that question. I think that's a wonderful and important question. As an antitrust lawyer and law professor, part of what I bring to this job, I hope, is both the analytical rigor and the methods of antitrust law that I think are really important to answer your question. So antitrust law is, of course, about protecting competition so that we may all enjoy the benefits of lower prices, innovation, and better services. But it's really also very important to remember that the Sherman Antitrust Act was instituted to protect democracy. To protect our people and to protect democracy. The choice and competition are all interwoven. So one of the questions that you asked when you talk about the many people who are using wireless telephone services, first of all, it's important to realize that some of the great work that the Centers for Disease Control has done has shown that in the state of California, for example, 82% of all adults in the state of California still live in households with landline telephones. So most adults in the state of California have both landline telephones and cell phones. Okay, may have several cell phones. I know I have two on myself, and my chief of staff there has two and her iPad. So most people in California see these things as complements, not substitutes. And one of the important methodologies that antitrust brings is to help us look at barriers to substitution and barriers to competition. So, for example, I always ask about, well, are there problems with getting the signal through when you're inside your house? So I know many times I'm talking to people on my cell phone inside my house, and people complain that they can't hear me well. And so I kind of had to revive my wireline telephone so that people could hear me better. There are also very important differences, for example, with battery backup, with power backup. One of the things that's really important for the wireline network is that, our good friends here have invested so that they have approximately 3 weeks worth of power backup available at the central office. And this is designed so that in the event of an earthquake and we lose power, that we still have telephone service. We didn't have any rules for battery backup or power backup on cell phone service until after the FCC instituted rules post-Katrina, because one one of the things they realized is that even though people had cell phones when they were stuck in their houses, they couldn't make any calls because even though the towers didn't fall down because of the winds or the floods, they lost power. And one of the things that we found in the San Diego blackout is that most cell phone towers today only have 8 hours worth of diesel power backup. And so after 8 hours, when the San Diego blackout lasted longer than that in many places, lasted 24 hours, a lot of people lost cell phone service. So I think asking these questions about barriers to competition and barriers to substitution is very important to how do we get to those questions you're fundamentally asking about how do we continue to serve people today, both the most vulnerable people, disabled people, people on medical baseline, seniors, as well as the plethora and diversity of Californians.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think our views are quite similar. I believe that regulation does have an important role to play. The industries that fall within the PUC's jurisdiction, going back to use a phrase from probably 100 years ago, are affected by the public interest. They're not just ordinary commodities. They are essentials of modern life. Power, heat, water. These are not just canned peas and tennis balls. They are vital infrastructure. And where we can have real competition working for consumers, we should promote that and encourage that. Where competition is not effective, we need to have regulatory oversight to make sure the public is protected. I use this example often in our commission discussions. My 80-year-old mother lives in the rural Midwest. She has a landline telephone. She does not have a computer, even though we've offered time and again to get her one, set it up, and teach her how to use it. She got along fine for 80 years without this newfangled stuff, and she doesn't want it and she doesn't need it. Now, for people like my mother, and we have many of them in California, particularly those of us of increasing age who aren't tied into the new information age and rely on that telephone as a lifeline. And I think we have to look out for those people as well as for the cutting edge folks who have the newest iPhone and the devices my staff has that I can't even name. So it's a tough challenge, particularly in telecommunications, because you have highly sophisticated consumers who can take care of themselves and shop around, and you have the folks like my mother who have a traditional landline phone and that's all they'll ever have, and if someone doesn't look after their interests in that service, there are going to be problems. I think it's similar in other industries. In water, obviously, since it's a product that's ingested, we have to worry about the quality and safety of that. And even in instances where markets are largely competitive, we have to look out for fraud and abuse that happens all too frequently. You know, you have a variety of very responsible market players, and then you have some people around the fringes, and someone has to police that. So I think there's a balance, but I'm one who believes there is still an important role for regulation in the public interest.
And this overarching question, I'm sure, will be explored in greater detail as we go around and get into the specific subjects. You both have a lot of important things to say. But if we're going to cover as many subjects as possible, I'm just going to ask you to, if you can, to try to be succinct in your answers so that we can get to as many questions as possible. Senator Alquist.
Thank you. First, let me say that I think Governor Brown did a stellar job in these nominees, and both of them. Had great conversations with both of you, and I feel like I'm very much aligned in values and philosophies. I represent almost 1 million people in my beloved Santa Clara County, and I understand that the two of you, as I mentioned privately, were not there when many of these horrific things occurred. But this is an opportunity for us to have a dialogue in a democracy, to have things on the record, and to understand what the culture will be for moving forward. I am very unhappy with the past behavior of the CPUC. I was up in Pacifica the weekend after the pipes broke in San Bruno and saw the smoldering fires. And I feel that the CPUC took a very passive approach to regulating safety. In terms of moving forward, what's going to be important to me is to know that the CPUC is a vigilant regulator, that it will establish meaningful penalties for those who put profit ahead of safety, and that it will ensure the safety of all Californians. Mr. Florio mentioned the importance of asking the right questions. I think that's part of it. I think we need to go beyond that. And not only is it a matter of asking the right questions for the CPUC to do, but it's also important to see that the right answers are implemented and monitored, and that's called accountability. So I have 5 categories of questions. I normally, as everyone knows, don't ask this many questions, and I'm sure there'll be a nice even flow, and with succinct answers, my colleagues and I will be able to get through everything. My first category is verifying the accuracy of PG&E. In July of last year, PG&E admitted that it failed to reclassify 172 miles of pipeline that is now in a highly populated area known as a high consequence area. The other day, PG&E admitted that they had miscalculated how much natural gas pipe was in a high consequence area by an additional 162 miles. Today, in the Cron, on the front page above the fold, it says PG&E finds more pipe it misclassified, and talks about nearly 300 miles of natural gas transmission lines that were not accounted for earlier, and PG&E just admitted that it lost track of development around these lines. So this is one area that I'd like to speak to. Given the thousands of lives at stake with respect to pipeline safety, many of whom are my constituents, how do you ensure that what PG&E reports is actually accurate? Are there ways to physically check or verify the accuracy of what they report back to the Commission? That's my first question.
Great. Well, thank you, first of all.
Brief answers.
Briefly. So, I mean, again, thank you, first of all, Senator Alquist, for your commitment to safety. And I wanted to emphasize that I share your commitment to safety. I have often said at PUC meetings that the code puts safety first. Section 451 of the California Public Utilities Code says safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And it is important for us to keep reminding the utilities that we regulate that the code also says their first duty, as well as ours, is safety. So with regard to verification, I'm very concerned about these many instances where PG&E has now found inaccuracies, failure to reclassify, missing maps, things that they didn't inspect that were supposed to be inspected every 5 years. If there is a good news and any silver glimmer in this, I won't say lining yet, it's that I think they are searching, that they are trying to come clean. And I was very happy to see the 2 employees who discovered the missing maps and the distribution lines that were never inspected. They were highlighted in the newsletter. They got their pictures taken and are celebrated as PG&E heroes. And that's a really important cultural shift. But as you say, we also need a cultural shift in the California Public Utilities Commission. We need more regular audits. We need more regular forensic audits, and our inspectors also need to get out there and inspect, and to ensure that everybody's also using modern tools. I think part of the reason why they lost track of stuff is they never really got onto this computer age that we're talking about. And so things just lost track. But even more than that, I think that they didn't place the appropriate value on documentation and classification. And so we need to ensure that they also adopt these modern tools, and more than that, that they adopt these values.
Yes, auditing, field inspections, things of that nature are essential. We have, with the support of the legislature, roughly doubled our number of field inspectors for natural gas pipelines. We'll never be able to have enough people to do every mile. That's the utilities' job. We have to be vigilant enough in our oversight, monitoring, and enforcement to make sure that they know they're being watched and they do the right thing. And I totally agree with Commissioner Sandoval that having the company itself motivated to do the right thing is the most important. I'm cautiously optimistic that the new leadership at PG&E takes that seriously. I know that there are hundreds, thousands of employees out in the field who have always taken that responsibility seriously. Unfortunately, there was a period of time when negative feedback internally was not welcome. And I think the recent honoring of employees who brought problems to the attention of management is a great example of the cultural change we wanted to see. It's entirely possible that 2 years ago those individuals would have been disciplined for what they did, and now they're being praised. That's a tremendous change for the better. And we need to do everything internally at the Commission, and we have many initiatives underway to elevate the importance of public safety, to give recognition to our staff that it's doing this important work every day, and not let it ever slip back to the kind of afterthought that it was in the past.
Thank you. And my second question in this first category, explain to me how I can go back to my constituents in Santa Clara County and tell them that the Commission is ensuring their safety and will continue to do that for decades to come. So my question, I understand we were talking about adopting values and we're talking about field inspectors, and I think you are both stellar, but I'd like to know what you are doing, what the Commission is going to do to see that 15 years from now or 20 years from now, there are policies in place for PG&E to understand and to follow.
Absolutely. And I think that's important. And one of the things that I said to my colleagues recently is that the test of our success with regard to gas pipelines is the gas pipeline system safer? Have we made the physical investments in infrastructure, in pipeline, in making pipeline easier to inspect, what they call piggable through these little robots, easier to inspect? Have we made the operations better to make the system safer? And that is our ultimate test. And I think that we need to do that. We've already started by requiring testing, by requiring hydro testing for the areas that had not been hydro testing. We have led the nation in ending the grandfathering regime, where though this type of testing was required by the federal government in the 1970s, they didn't require testing for the pipeline that had been laid before on the theory that time was an adequate test. Well, as we saw sadly in San Bruno, time ran out. But also there, it's not just simply time, but that what they put in the ground was inadequate. The National Transportation Safety Board found that what they put in the ground was in fact not pipeline quality pipes.
Right.
but 5 pups of God only knows what manufacturer, and they still haven't been able to document their origin. So again, careful attention to safety, and I would like to say also having our auditing function be more consistent. Are they spending in accordance? And the bills that this legislature passed and the governor signed, so Senator Padilla's bill, Assemblymember Hill's bill, and many other bills on pipeline safety will be very important in helping us to get there. And I've been working with my staff and just making sure that the interpretations don't create any holes that people could drive a truck through, because we want to see that operations, maintenance, integrity, the whole thing, the whole system is better.
Thank you.
I think I took the focus of your question to be how do we make it last?
Yes.
And that
Beyond our years here.
Right.
Yes.
And of course, a commission can't bind a future commission. What we can do is adopt state-of-the-art rules and regulations that, while they could be changed in the future, I think all of us that have been through this horrible experience are going to remember for a very long time and not let those regulations be rolled back. I think we're also working very hard internally. You know, the reports that have been done have been critical of us as well as of PG&E. And we really, from the executive director on down, there is a real commitment to change the way we do business. One of the big problems in the past has been that safety only gets attention when something goes wrong. So it may sound like a little thing, but I think it's very important. We now have a safety report at every commission meeting, and different members of the safety division come make presentations, report on their work, whether it's rail safety or electric infrastructure, gas infrastructure. That gets the commissioners acquainted with them. It gives them visibility and pride in their work, and we're working on many other similar reforms to help elevate the role of safety and make those as institutionally solid as possible.
Thank you. My second I have 5 categories, if that's all right. My
But no, I want you to make sure we ask every one of them. I'm just wondering if we
however you want to do it.
mix them up. Why don't we do another? Why don't you do 2 and 3?
Okay.
Then we'll go around the horn and we'll come back.
Okay.
If they're not asked, we'll come back to 4 and 5.
That would be fine. I think we'll do 3 and 4 because number 2 was really answered. And I'll tell you what I was going to ask in number 2, which was in 2007, CPUC authorized PG&E to spend $5 million to replace a section of the same pipeline that exploded in San Bruno, but the work was not done. In 2009, PG&E repeated its request to replace the pipe, but with the new completion date of 2013. So the question really was, PG&E doesn't seem to keep track of things really well. Aside from self-reports, what procedures does the Commission now have in place to ensure projects are completed? I think you pretty much answered that, but I just wanted to have that for the record. So my question, I'll do questions 3 and 4. Question 3 is about safeguards. In PG&E's recent approved general rate case, the Commission included 2 new reporting requirements to PG&E. They are, number 1, PG&E must provide semi-annual reports on its investments in distribution pipeline safety, and number 2, PG&E must produce annual reports explaining which budget projects were deferred or reprioritized and why. So the questions, and I'll just stop with the questions here and then say the rest for later if they're not answered. I have 3 small questions under this. First one, many have wondered if we have allowed the regulated community to monitor itself. Do you feel the safeguards contained within PG&E's general rate case are sufficient to ensure money allocated for safety is really spent on safety? Is the first of the 3. Then I'll stop there.
Well, these are important questions, and I think that a lot of your concerns are also raised in the Consumer Protection and Safety Division report that we just adopted at the Commission meeting last Thursday. This report has a number of findings and recommendations, so that will be the subject of a future rulemaking. But one of the things that really caught my attention in this report contains a forensic audit where they looked back at the pattern of PG&E spending and allegations of underspending, where they were authorized to do spending, and found this pattern going back over a very long period of time, since 1997. And there are many things that concern me about that, but it means that that our infrastructure has been under-provisioned, that possibly rates were over-collected, which really could be contradictory to the requirement for just and reasonable rates. But more importantly, there is a rule that they have to operate the system in accordance with safety and reliability. And so, as you said, one of the things I've been concerned about at the PUC is the lack of trend analysis. So things tend to get piecemealed, each little case gets treated on its own, and there doesn't seem to be enough looking back at what about the last GRC? Did they actually spend that? There's this theory that, well, some years they might underspend, some years they might overspend, it'll all even out. But there isn't really okay, if they underspend, how does that carry on to the next GRC? I'm seeing that lack of trend analysis that, again, is a basic of business. And I think that we need to take that long view and that trend analysis.
Given your wonderful expertise in this area, and given, I believe, PG&E underspends in terms of what it provides to ratepayers, and now is wanting a great deal of money from ratepayers, how are you going to work on this trend analysis?
So I think many ways. First of all, as you mentioned, and the report recommends a variety of actions. One of the things that, again, as a lawyer and a law professor, I tell my students, you always want two things in litigation. You either want the money, I tell the show me the money clause, or you want the thing done that the person was supposed to do in the first place. So I think that it's going to be very important as we consider what to do about PG&E and these violations, and of course this horrible tragedy at San Bruno that should never have happened, that we look at the money and monetary penalties, but I want the thing done.
I want that the most, yes.
Yes, and I think we have set the right framework in place, but that's based on what we know today, and we have to keep a close eye on how these new rules and regulations are implemented to make sure that they work the way it was intended. I think Senator Padilla's bill goes a long way to addressing the issue, and if there are gaps, we will find them and we will fill them.
Thank you, and thank you.
Mr. Ahlquist, thank you, and of course we'll come back to you for any other category. Senator Fuller.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we covered many topics in my office, all the way from smart meters and approval of RPS contracts and reforming the tier, and I appreciated that time. So I'm just going to ask kind of two parts to one question that we touched on but didn't get a chance to follow up on. We had discussed briefly that the Commission had met with Fresno Mayor Swearingen, and that she had a proposal. And while I did get the proposal since we talked, and I'm still reviewing it, I'm just kind of interested in if you see any type of action that might come out of the sort of stimulus seed of discussion, think tank discussion, that would help lower the electrical rate or remove barriers to food processing kinds of production issues, or even incinerated biogas. Some of the issues that are a potential problem to solution that could use some expertise in an area that has 25 to 30% unemployment.
I understand that the mayor of Fresno and her team have been working with PG&E on a proposal. I don't think it's been put before us yet, but clearly, constructive solutions to the severe unemployment problems that we have in certain parts of the state has to be a high priority, and whatever proposal is forthcoming will receive very serious consideration. One of the things I've suggested that I believe is going to be implemented is that we have a commission meeting in the Central Valley. It has been years, if ever, that the commission has been there in a formal sense. And I think it's important, not just symbolically, but for us to learn what the issues are. It's a huge state. It's a diverse state. The issues that are pressing in San Francisco and Los Angeles are not the same as the issues elsewhere, and we need to hear that firsthand, and I think that entails not just a formal business meeting, but meetings before and after with local community leaders and citizens to get a better handle. I know I've talked with several of you about the fact that the valley, with the heat, and air conditioning demand, needs energy efficiency as much as anywhere in the state, and yet somehow these programs are not getting the same emphasis. And that's something that I and my staff will be working on very diligently this coming year to make sure that these programs that are perhaps better understood and publicized in the coastal areas are similarly available and publicized in the inland areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I had a wonderful meeting with Mayor Swearington, and her team was very impressed by her work and commitment to Fresno, and look forward to working with her to analyze her rate proposals. One of the things that we talked about with her was also energy efficiency and the need to bring energy efficiency proactively to businesses and, of course, to households in Fresno. I have long been concerned, and I've been asking a lot of questions about our energy efficiency policies and how they have been targeted. And, for example, while I think programs like the Whole House program, it was an ambitious effort, the demographics of it show that it mostly has reached dual income, no children households on the coast. And they are not the ones who drive peak power consumption. And, when you look back at the statute, when the legislature codified energy efficiency, one of the things that was codified is do energy efficiency to help to address peak. And so I think we need to really make sure that our programs are well-tailored and also affordable. One of the things that I also talked to Mayor Swearington about was that in addition to working with PG&E, that they should also consider one of the programs that we've worked on, thanks again to the legislature for renewing it, the Self-Generation Incentive Program, which is, really represents a huge change from the whole theory before of monopoly generation, monopoly transmission, monopoly distribution, and where we were all just consumers, to now people, whether they're households or businesses, being able to produce their own energy and sell it back to the grid. And so through the Self-Generation Incentive Program, it has provided incentives that many businesses have used to dramatically cut down on their bills. Although I grew up in Los Angeles, I lived in Santa Clara County, am a Sharks hockey fan, and there's a great story from the Sharks Ice. It's the ice rink where the Sharks practice, and it's also open to kids for their birthday parties and such. They had a tremendously high electricity bill. I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, but it was in the tens of thousands a month. And using the Self-Generation Incentive Program, they cut their bill by more than half. It was a dramatic cut in
That's why they didn't win in the playoffs. They couldn't spend that money on having the better players. It makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good theory. I like that.
It's revealing. Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
And just at last to close on that, one of the other things that I also talked to Mayor Swearington about is that I have met with PG&E in particular to talk about what we could do to speed connections for small businesses. I met with Betty Jo Tacoli, a longtime friend of mine who I've known since I've worked on small business issues at the FCC, and was very dismayed to hear from a roundtable of small businesses how several several small businesses all over the state would call and say, okay, I want to start a business, got my license, ready to go, want to get connected. When may I get power, please? When can you connect me? And some companies, and sadly particularly PG&E, were giving them connection times that were 3 to 4 months out. Now, I've talked to some businesses that say they couldn't get connected, they couldn't get power for 6 months. Now, in some cases, they had a date where they had to start operating because of their business license to make money, revenues. They had to operate on diesel generators, which also has environmental impacts. And then when I double-checked with Southern California Edison and some of their small business team and said, when a small business calls and says, opening up business, opening up my doors, how long does it take? It takes 2 to 3 days. And so I have talked to PG&E, and they have made this a priority to speed the connection time and to get closer to their peers in terms of connection times so we can start business and jobs.
Excellent. And actually, you anticipated my second question was, and I hope we'll be seeing you in my area of the Central Valley and up and down the valley a little more frequently, and you've already offered that, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Fuller. Senator Dutton. Big D.
Thank you for spending the time that we did together. And actually, I just have a couple of things I want to clarify. Obviously, the Public Utilities Commission is a very important commission. You have, I think, in this proposed budget that's coming up, you're looking at a $1.4 billion budget that's a combination of state and federal fees. You have over 1,000 employees, so it's kind of a real responsibility. You also have a 6-year term, so obviously that's there so that you aren't subject to all the political pressures that sometimes can be part of the process. But what I'm concerned about is a couple of things regarding, and as we were talking in my office, one of my chief concerns is how rate hikes affect not only just the residential folks of the state, but also the small business community and business community in general. And what I'm, for both of you, is there any avenue or any way that you do any kind of an economic analysis as to the impact so that we can actually make sure that the possible cost or harm isn't worse than what the actual benefit may be?
We have both our Division of Ratepayer Advocates staff and many third-party interveners that regularly present us with testimony on the impacts of proposed rate increases on the different sectors that they represent. Probably doesn't rise to the level of a full-blown economic analysis, but certainly we seek out and receive a lot of public input. My history and background is as a consumer advocate. I'm used to looking at utility requests and figuring out ways to get the work done with less, and that's what I intend to continue as a commissioner. Is now there are things that have to be spent for important objectives, safety, reliability, environment, etc. But my commitment is to make sure these companies are as lean and mean as possible, and that we treat the customer's money like it was our own, and be extremely judicious in allowing rate increases.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question, and of course for your commitment to keeping rates low, both for households as well as for businesses. So while our Energy Division and our Department of Water and Audits do some trend analysis, one of my frustrations, Senator, is that I think this commission does not do enough trend analysis, does not do enough deep analysis, and I think that analysis could be much better to really reveal where are we being effective, where do we have problems, and where are things well calibrated and where are they not. So, for example, rates are supposed to take into account climate zones. Are we doing a good job taking into account climate zones? How do we account climate change into that? How do we calculate summer, right? So if you go to Costa Rica, I was there in June, and they're like, why did you come in the winter? I'm like, you're north of the equator, it's summer. But even here, right, even here, PG&E defines summer as 6 months, whereas Edison defines summer as 3 months. Okay, if you've been in LA, June gloom, it doesn't feel like summer. But the definition of how you define summer is very important to the rates and to the rates that people experience. And also, one of the things that I've always advocated is that one size fits all doesn't always fit all. And one example of that is time of use pricing. So perhaps I commit heresy here, but here I go. So, but with time of use pricing, one of the things I'm cognizant of in meeting with some of the small businesses and some of the farmers, I, as a city girl, learned about a title that was new to me, the ditch master. And so the ditch master will call and say, okay, water's coming down the ditch, go and turn your pumps on so you can pump the water. All right, and the single largest user of energy in the state of California is the movement of water. Now, can those people shift their time of use of these very old energy-intensive pumps to 7 o'clock at night when the energy would be efficient? If they waited, if the ditch master called and said, your water will be coming by at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they shifted to 7 o'clock at night, the water would be 400 miles downstream. They are, in legal parlance, we would say, they are at a disability to mitigate, but basically they can't shift their time. The water will be gone. And so I think that our policies need to be very sensitive to those areas where one size does not fit all.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think sometimes our policies have a tendency to work against us, especially in the area of hydroelectric power, which you and I talked a great deal about, and I'll leave it at that. Frankly, the farm community actually may be a help in that area of being able to generate some power. One of the areas of concern I've had here recently was the governor made it clear that he wants to keep the PGS program intact. He's charged you with the responsibility to continue doing this program, but find another method to go in that direction. I guess one of my concerns would be we currently have a cap and trade program, which I remember Mary Nichols, when I was on utilities, said California shouldn't venture in that direction by itself, but here we are. And I'm curious, that's supposed to generate over $1 billion. Maybe you should be looking at that as being a possible source of the revenue you need for some of these programs. At least that might have a closer nexus between R&D and things like that. And so I would ask you just maybe kind of take a look at that. Yeah. Also, too, I was talking to Senator Huff as well as we did talk briefly about this. Senator Huff and Assemblymember Hagman, they've got a problem down in the Chino Hills area, and it has to do with the transmission lines that are currently going through the Chino Hills area. I'm very familiar with it, as we talked about. Yeah. There's some very sensitive habitat in that area as well. And that's to go ahead and create a line for the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Project. My questions to you would be just two of them. Have you gone to Chino Hills to look at the towers that are being proposed and the potential impact that it'll have on the local community and the homeowners? And what was your opinion of what you saw?
Well, we've both been to Chino Hills to see. All 5 commissioners have been there. I think from our conversations, everyone's reaction was, to borrow a phrase, shock and awe at the magnitude of those towers in the middle of the community. And we've taken the almost unprecedented step of reopening a 2-year-old decision to relook at the alternatives. And Edison has been directed to file testimony looking at alternative routes or undergrounding possibilities. I understand the city is preparing a response to that, and I believe there may even be an initial hearing today on that matter. I think, these are tough issues. I can't say sitting here today what the outcome will be, but I think the incredible effort that the people of Chino Hills have put into bringing this to our attention has certainly succeeded in putting it front and center on the Commission's agenda.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, I also enjoyed the opportunity to visit the city of Chino Hills. Wanted to thank Assemblyman Kirk Hagman for his very informative tour. I would also note that my energy advisor, Colette Kirsten, and I went there in the driving rain and enjoyed still, the tour and just the impact that it still has even in the driving rain, let alone a bright, beautiful day. So I was one of the people on the commission who was particularly concerned about the issues with the Federal Aviation Administration, and I have asked our staff a number of questions about whether the issues of the lighting that may be required and the catenary balls, little balls in between the wires, would be required because of the proximity of these lines to the Chino Hills Airport. And one of the concerns is that even though the order where the previous commission in 2009 approved this route said you must pay attention to the FAA issues, there's a let's just say there is a dearth of discussion in the underlying environmental impact report about the FAA issues. And one of the interesting things that we've heard is that sometimes utilities say, well, we can't fully anticipate whether or not we would need lighting or catenary balls because we don't know the final route in advance. We don't get FAA approval in advance. This is not Edison's first 200-foot tower. It's not Edison's first tower near an airport. And I know even when I had the opportunity to be the Vice President General Counsel of a small business, the Spanish Media, that was headquartered here in California, we had 33 radio stations, and some of our most important assets were the radio towers. And we had to light our towers. Our little business knew that we had to light our towers. So that was one of the issues that I really worked on with the staff and supported the stop work order that gives us an opportunity to evaluate the petition for reconsideration. We just received some inputs and are weighing carefully the alternatives and options.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for the answer, and I appreciate your comments in there because President Peavy actually indicated he was willing to, reevaluate. It sounds like both of you are on that same page, so I just want to thank you. And I'll close with this. It's just actually more of a statement. It's been my experience lately, here since I've been in the legislature. Unfortunately, as much as we try to be as sometimes specific as possible with some of the laws that we actually, pass and then the governor signs, a lot of times it's up to interpretation on the part of yourselves. And so don't hesitate to come back for some clarification. The worst thing we can do is base something, regulatory climate on guesses and not actual science. So don't hesitate to ask us for clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dunn. Actually, just briefly responded to something you just said. It's often that the legislature intentionally leaves things vague in a statement. Well, no, I guess I'm telling one of those secrets that nobody knows. But the reason is often it's not bad faith or that we forgot. It's that sometimes that ambiguity is the only way to build a coalition to get the votes necessary to pass a law. Because if you define it one way strictly, then you're not going to be able to have the support. So what Senator Dutton's question speaks to, though, again, is the inherent power of administrative agencies like the PUC with constitutional protection to do their very best to interpret the intent of the law. Before we turn it over to Senator De Leon, who is next, it's been an hour and 20 minutes, and hour and 10, and our court reporter. Break time? I think so. Let's take a 10-minute break and be back at 3 o'clock. Right? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.